Hello, and welcome to this session on menopause, mindset, recovery, and rest and stress. I never know quite what I'm calling it, but a combination of all those things. We'll kick off by looking at mindset. So, in terms of our response to menopause, we obviously everybody's in a different situation. I'm not going to pretend to understand or know exactly what you're going through, but in terms of when I'm talking to my clients about our experience through menopause and based on my own experience as well, we can tend to get very stuck in a kind of fairly negative mindset where we're spending a lot of time going, it's not fair, or we're focusing on what we used to be able to do and comparing ourselves to what we used to be able to do. So going, I used to be able to do this, it's not fair that I can't do this anymore. Why can't I do that? Or everybody else can, comparing ourselves to everybody else. And that's a completely natural reaction. And of course, you're going to spend some time there. But if that is where you are spending the majority of your time, if when you think about your body, your experience of menopause, if these are the thoughts that are coming up over and over again, ask yourself if that's actually helping you. Is that helping you feel any better? Or is it actually just causing you more stress on top of all the other stress of menopause? And if it's something that you can see is stressing you, the first step is that awareness, to be aware that you're in that you're getting stuck in that mindset. And then the second step is to think, is it something that I would like to change? And is it something that I'm prepared to work on changing? In terms of how we do that, it's absolutely not easy. I'm not going to say, oh, you just click your fingers and it's done, but it is a process that you can work through. And it's a process I work through with my clients on a regular basis on menopause, but on a whole load of other things as well. And if we put some time and focus into trying to change our mindset, we can start to change our mindset and get to a point where it's serving us better. And this is a process that I've worked on myself for a good few years now, and it absolutely revolutionized my life and my enjoyment of life, because instead of spending my time in a negative place, I'm spending more time in a positive mindset. Something that's really challenging through menopause, but it's something I've worked on, and you can get to that more positive point. So 2 ideas of how you go about that. First of all, ask yourself, whatever it is you're getting stuck on, is it something you can do anything about? So to take the example of menopause and going, oh, I can't train like this and I'm putting on weight and I'm getting really stressed and I can't sleep and everything. So all these kind of things that we can reel off as, all the negative sides of menopause. Is there anything you can do about it or about them? And you can take each of them individually. And where there is something you can do, great. That's you have agency now, so you can take action on those things. So for example, in terms of your training, you can say, yes, it's really unfair that I lose bone mass, I lose bone density and muscle mass as I go through menopause. That's really unfair. Men don't have that same response. You can stay stuck there, or you can say, there is something I can do about it. I can do more strength training. I can support my muscles and my bones by eating more protein. In terms of feeling tired all the time, I can spend more time on the recovery and the stress reduction, the things that we'll be looking at today. On the things you can't do anything about, the things that are just a fact of life, I can't change the fact that I'm going to go through menopause. Rather than getting stuck there and going over and over in my mind, spending time thinking how unfair it is, can I learn just to accept it and move on? And I want to be really, really clear when I talk about acceptance, I am not talking about accepting the unacceptable. If you go and see a doctor and they don't recognize the experience you're having of menopause or something, and they just kind of, disregard you, that is not acceptable. And that is not a case where we say, oh, I should just accept it. There's something you can do something about, or you can choose to do something about. So it's not about accepting the unacceptable, but it's about saying, is there any point in spending time getting upset on things that I can't do anything about? On some of the things, you'll say, yes, I could do strength training, I could do this, I could do that. And then you go, well, no, actually, right now, I haven't got the time or the energy to put into that. And so that turns into an actually no for now. And again, that's about accepting that. So rather than beating ourselves up and spending time getting more and more stressed about all the things we should be doing to make our menopause better, some of them we're just going to accept that we're not going to do anything about now. That's not a no for never, but right now it's not the right time for us. And so that's about accepting and moving on and focusing on the things that we can do something about. Another kind of idea to use in terms of developing a more positive mindset, one that's going to help you better, is to look at how you can reframe those thoughts. So we can get stuck in, it's not fair, and it's not fair that I can't do X, Y, Z. It's not fair that I can't run as fast as I used to. It's not fair that I can't keep up with other people, whatever it is. And we can get stuck there. Or we can say, okay, that's true, But is there a way of seeing that slightly differently that feels more empowering for me, less negative, isn't keeping me stuck in that negative space? And that can be really hard. And people, when I sort of talk to them about doing this, they're like, what, you want me to say it's absolutely brilliant and I love having menopause? And of course not. Well, that might be where you're at, but that's a big jump. So rather than trying to go, if you imagine a ladder and you're somewhere near the bottom of the ladder in terms of your sort of mindset around the issue, rather than trying to get all the way up to the top where it's, the birds are singing and coming up roses and everything, just think, can I take one step up the ladder? Can I take one or two steps up so it's a little bit less negative? I'm not looking for perfection, but it's looking a little bit less negative. So, for example, we could go from it's not fair that I can't do that, really upset and pissed off about it, to it's just a fact of life that I can't do that. So we haven't changed the fact that I can't do it, but we're not putting that it's not fair to it. It's just a fact. We could go from that to I can't do that, but I can do this instead. So yes, I do want to go off and do that running with my friends as fast as they are, but I can't do that right now. But I could do this instead, and I can look for the enjoyment in that. Or we can potentially even move towards actually seeing some of the positives. So saying there's some benefits of having this early warning that's come in, and it's giving me this sign that I need to take better care of myself, and I've still got time to do something about it. So rather than getting to an age where we've lost our muscles, we've lost our bone, not lost literally, but they've degraded so much that it's a lot harder to do something. Here's that early warning, and there is something I can do about it, and I can start taking action on it now. So just trying to reframe those thoughts. So rather than being wholly negative and we're spending all our time, and I'm not saying that you are, I'm just giving examples, but rather than getting stuck in that negative space, can we just start to change things so that it serves us better? Now, whenever I work with clients on this, it's, as I say, it is really hard. It is really challenging. You've spent so long thinking one way, and to change your thoughts is going to take some time and effort. But think how many times you think that negative thought. Just starting to change those thoughts around is going to help you. So each time, rather than the thought going down to that negative place, you just think, okay, I can see I'm going to that negative place. How can I start to tweak it? And each time you tweak it, and each time you go in that more positive direction, it becomes that little bit easier. So it takes time, it takes effort. It can feel really false because you're like, oh, I'm putting on this happy smile for the sake of it. But at the moment, we've been really negative for the sake of it. And somehow we get so used to being in that negative space, it doesn't occur to us that actually we could change that round. There's no, it's no more false to be negative than it is to be positive. It's just finding a journey through our thoughts that's going to serve us better. So that's some ideas on mindset. It's something I can talk about till the cows come home. So if you've got more questions about it, we can certainly talk about it in the questions at the end. But let's move on now to look at sort of the stress side of menopause. So we know that there's lots of things in life that stress us. It can be family, relationships, work, money, social pressures and expectations, the news, definitely at the moment. Well, always. We have all these kind of not normal, but external things, and we're just used to them all stressing us. And then suddenly we get to menopause, we have our hormones changing, and we have a whole cascade of physical things going on. And then we have a whole load of other things going on, which cause us more stress. We can find that our mindset, we're getting more and more worried by things than we used to. So we get more and more anxiety, we're doing more and more ruminating, going over and over the same things, getting worried about them. We know that menopause can affect our sleep, both because of that mindset getting stressed out, but also physical changes that are happening. And when we are lacking sleep, everything else feels worse. But also in terms of stress, our body recovers when we're asleep. And if we're not getting that sleep, we're getting less sleep, we're losing that balance in terms of maintaining or managing our stress. We know that in terms of food, so we talked about this yesterday, as we go through menopause, we can have a more inflammatory reaction to foods, but also because we're feeling so knackered, we start craving sweet foods, sugary foods. Sugary foods can be have an inflammatory reaction to our body. So we might be having, for those two different reasons, we've got more kind of inflammation from our food. We might be underfueling our training because we're so worried about putting on weight, we start underfueling, and that in itself is a stress on our body. And then we've got our training, which may have been a constant, but suddenly we need more recovery to be able to absorb that training. And so the training is becoming more and more of a stress. So some of those things, they were always there, but they can become more stressful as we go through menopause. Now, stress in itself isn't a bad thing. We need stress to build ourselves stronger, but we need to keep the balance of recovery. If we've got stress and recovery in balance, everything's okay. But when we get to the point, and potentially menopause is that thing that kind of tips us over the edge, metaphorically, where the stress becomes so large that we're not recovering from it, that's when we get problems. And when I'm talking stress, I'm talking stress in all the different forms. We could be talking stress in terms of, I feel stressed. It's a very kind of, in my head, not in my head, but I'm feeling it in my head, my thoughts. I feel stressed. I feel that tension up in my shoulders. We could be talking about stress on our body, maybe something we're not so aware of. But for example, that inflammation that so much can increase during menopause, that's a big stress on our body. We could be talking about training stress and whether we recover from that training stress. So lots of different types of stress. But with all of them, the key is, can we recover from them? And if not, then that's when we start getting injured, we start getting ill, we start getting burnt out, and we just aren't feeling, we're not feeling great. A really shocking stat is that I think they say over 75% of visits to a GP come from stress, related to stress in some format. So the more that we can do to manage that stress, the better. Stress is both, really unpleasant for us in the moment, but there's so many long-term health impacts from stress. So the more we can learn to manage it and deal with potentially increased stress during menopause, the healthier we'll be, and hopefully the happier we're going to be feeling. So in terms of how we try and get that back into balance, there's different things we can be doing. We can be looking to reduce the source of the stress. We can be looking to manage our reaction to that stress and help ourselves de-stress. And then we can be looking at increasing the recovery. So in terms of reducing the source of stress, we've talked in previous days about nutrition, and we've talked about training. So I'm not going to go over that again today, but those can definitely be sources of stress on our body and things that we want to address. And as I say, look into the sessions I've done previously for those. In terms of reducing the sources of stress, though, that's less to do with the diet or the training. Particularly as women, we're really crap at saying no to things. We're really useless at boundaries. We always want to help people. I'm generalizing, I'm massively generalizing here, of course, but we want to help people and we want to feel we can do it all. We have that kind of, I can do it, I don't want to ask for help. If we can learn to put in some boundaries, if we can learn to say no, if we can learn to ask for help when we need it, we can massively start reducing that stress. And often, we think that we're pushing things back onto other people, but often it can help. There's more clarity in those relationships with other people. So learning to put those boundaries in can be a massive potential to reduce the sources of stress. We're often perfectionists. And that is putting so much extra stress on ourselves because we're having to do everything to perfection, learning to leave behind those perfectionist tendencies. And so often when I work with clients or I work with people, they'll say to me, yeah, but I am a perfectionist, and that's just how it is. Every time you say that, you are fighting for something that you potentially want to leave behind. So stop saying, I'm useless at that, I'm a perfectionist, I'm an all or nothing person. Every time we say it, we're reinforcing it. But those are things we can change. Going back to that mindset side of things, we can choose to change them. It takes work, but putting that amount of time into the work now can save you so much time over the long run. So learning to say good enough is good enough rather than everything has to be done to perfection, or learning to perfect things like our recovery and our de-stressing and putting as much emphasis on doing that perfectly. I don't think you can do anything perfectly, but putting as much emphasis on that as all the other things that we try to do to perfection. Learning not to procrastinate. So procrastination is generally because we're scared of doing something. Realizing that, asking ourselves, what am I actually scared of? And what is it I can do to reduce the fear that I've got around it? How can I just get started on the task? Normally, the biggest thing is getting the ball rolling. Once it's rolling, it's a lot easier to keep going. So learning how to work with ourselves to reduce procrastination. Moving on from worrying and ruminating. We spend so much time in our heads going over and over, worrying and worrying, remaking decisions. All of that takes time. And going back to that mindset work, the more we can learn to work on our mindset, identify when we're thinking thoughts that aren't serving us, and how we can move on to somewhere that serves us better, can save us so much time in the long run and stress. Doom scrolling, we spend all our time looking at bad things, we spend all our time on social media. I'm not going to give the whole cut down on social media talk here, but we all know there's a lot of stuff that we're doing which isn't good for us. The never-ending to-do list, we put more and more things onto that to-do list and we don't have any feeling of control over that to-do list. So rather than having the never-ending to-do list, deciding what we're focusing our effort on and doing that. And I'm sure there's a million other things as well, but those are some of the things, particularly working with women, that I find can be some of the biggest sources of stress. And as I said, diet and training, but we've covered those in previous sessions. But however much we do to reduce those sources, there are always going to be occasions that we get to where we are stressed. So ask yourself now, what de-stresses you? What do you know you can do to de-stress yourself? And then ask yourself how often you do it. Some of the suggestions I've got, and these aren't exhaustive by any means, but one of the most powerful things that we can do, and one of the cheapest, I mean, as in free, easiest, and not really time consuming at all things that we can do is to work on our breathing. So I'll just take you really quickly through a quick breathing exercise now, where we're going to work on just trying to focus on our breathing and try and work on de-stressing ourselves. Sorry, that sounds very active and not very de-stressing at all, but we will work on relaxing ourselves as we go. So if you want to, you can turn off your camera if you've got your camera on, absolutely up to you. If you just sit wherever you're sitting or standing, and you can have your eyes open if you want, you can have your eyes shut, whatever you find more comfortable. And I want you just to start to focus on your breath. So taking a nice deep breath in and out. Breathing in again, and as you breathe in, trying to follow the breath all the way down. Particularly when we're in a stressed response, we'll find that we breathe into our shoulders. We do very shallow breathing in our chest. So rather than the breathing just into our chest and kind of into our shoulders, try and follow that breath all the way down to your belly. Some of you will be much more used to doing that and find it quite easy. Others of you might find it quite challenging. But as you breathe in, try and follow that breath all the way down to your belly. Feel your belly expand, feel your rib cage expand. Feel the ribs swing out to the sides, to the front, behind you as you breathe in. And now start to focus on your out breath. So as you breathe out, try and just elongate that out breath. I'm not going to count for you because everybody has different breath and I don't want to stress you out by doing a longer breath than you're comfortable with. But just try and make your breath out a little bit longer than your breath in. And on your next out breath, I want you just to start to walk through your body from your head down to your toes, pausing as you go and noting whether you're holding any tension there. So let's start with your face. Make sure that you're not screwing up your face. Make sure you're not clenching your jaw. Think about relaxing your eyebrows, getting rid of any frowning. Feel that tongue just be gently or maybe touching to the roof of your mouth, completely relaxing your face and your head. On the next out breath, down to your shoulders. As you breathe out, feel those shoulders drop, just dropping down to the floor, letting go of any tension that you're holding there. On the next out breath, paying attention to your stomach, to your pelvic floor. If you're familiar with your pelvic floor, don't worry if you're not. Maybe your inner thighs, anywhere else that you might just be gripping or clenching, and relax. We're still sitting upright. We're still gently engaging our postural muscles, but we're not tensing anything. And then on the next out breath, just thinking about those legs, feeling any tension just flowing down through the legs, down to the feet, out into the floor. So just a few more breaths, focusing on that deep breath in, all the way down to the belly, and then on that out breath, as you breathe out, just focusing on relaxing, letting the tension leave your body. Lovely. So we're going to leave that there. I would love to spend longer on that. But just give me a quick, in the chat if you're happy, did that feel helpful? Do you feel at least a tiny bit less stressed than you were before you started? Or give me a thumbs up or whatever, just so I can get, and please be honest, don't say, oh, that felt great if it felt awful. But hopefully it helped to give you just a little sort of, what's the word, an idea of how that can help to relax you, of how that can help to reduce your stress as you're going. And it's something really powerful. You can do it just sitting at your desk, you know, during the working day or whatever, particularly if there's something coming up that you know is going to stress you. So before doing a presentation like this or something, I will spend some time just sitting at my desk and making sure I focus on that, and making sure you don't do the, oh, I've got to do the breathing, but actually relaxing into it. It can take 30 seconds and it can be so powerful. If you get that email from your boss saying, can you come into the office and see me? And you're like, oh my God, what's going to go wrong? And you know that if you walk in when you're really wound up, it's all going to go wrong. Instead, doing 30 seconds of breathing as you walk towards the door can just help to control you, and then you react so much better in the moment rather than going into that kind of fight or flight panic mode where A, our hormones are going haywire, it's not good for our health, but B, we're not going to give a good reaction in that situation. I love Gemma's response. I hope you don't mind me sharing. She says, it made me feel good, but also made me feel guilty for not remembering to do something. So straightforward, that can be really useful. Try, and it's so common, I don't want to pick on you, Gemma, at all, but the more we spend time feeling guilty, the more time we spend like whipping ourselves going, oh God, I did that wrong, then we're just adding to the stress. So trying to be aware of that mindset and saying, are my thoughts serving me? Where I'm feeling guilty, can I just change that to, oh, yes, that's a good reminder that this is something really helpful and I can use it going forwards, and we can just cut out that little bit of guilt within it. So just being aware of our thoughts and what we're saying to ourselves. Okay, so we've got the breathing. Powerful, powerful, really good way. And in terms of all the physical changes, I was saying 75% of doctors' visits are around stress. Breathing is literally changing the hormones that have been released in our body away from those stress hormones down to, that putting us back into that rest and digest, that relaxed state. So it's powerful in terms of the physical damage of stress as well, and helping to reduce that. Movement is a really, really powerful way to reduce stress. So when we all know you're getting stressed about something, you go for a walk, you feel better. It doesn't have to be a long walk. We always overload it and go, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. Just going out even for just 5 minutes can be really powerful to help us reduce that stress. We know that exercise helps us. So many of my clients, I work with them, and the reason they exercise is for their mental health and to reduce stress. But make sure we're not adding in stress, so that we're not either going so hard because we just want to work really hard and forget about everything that's happened. Great, that might work in terms of relieving your thoughts, but you're adding more stress back into the equation. And also make sure we're not running away from our thoughts. So, movement is great, but sometimes just walking or something, having some time to think through, can be more powerful. And then there's loads of techniques that we have for calming our mind. And this is another one where people kind of feel guilty because they know that they could, should, whatever, do these things, and they don't get round to them. But even 5 minutes can make a massive difference. So non-sleep deep rest, you can get loads of kind of scripts on YouTube or whatever for you to listen to, which can help you just have some active rest time. Meditation, we beat ourselves up that I'm no good at meditation. There is not being good at meditation. The more we do it, the easier it gets. But rather than kind of doing this, oh, I tried and my thoughts kept wandering, that's fine. But as we do it more, we get more used to our thoughts not wandering. Mindfulness, you can do that as sitting there and being very mindful as a practice, but just being mindful in your every day, looking around you, living in the present rather than living in the past or the future. We spend so much time worrying about things from the past, worrying about things from the future, that we're not actually living in the moment. So making that time to be present in the moment. Yoga can be really, really helpful. There's so much about change of state in terms of our physical, as well as our mental side. So that can be really helpful. Just spending time in nature. There's so much evidence that time in nature helps to de-stress us, helps to build our mental health. Ditto time with pets. So loads of different ideas there. There's loads of others as well, but different things to try, and see how they work for you. I wrote a blog a few weeks ago about my experiences going through a menopause and some of the changes that I'd made. And one of the things that I talked about in there, and I'm trying to multitask and type into the chat box at the same time, I'm failing. But I wrote a blog about what I'd done in terms of this side of things, the kind of mental stress side of things, reducing that mental stress. So there's some links through in there, but these are some of the things that I was exploring. I did when I couldn't sleep, particularly, I was doing the non-sleep deep rest. Loads of people use Calm and Headspace as apps, and they're great. I used to use Headspace. I don't like it that much anymore. I found that the Balance app and the Waking Up app are great, and they both have free trials for them. Time in nature. I know that I can go for a walk by myself in nature, and I know that I can do yoga and yoga with Adrian or something by myself, but I wasn't making the time for it. So I had to book in to go to classes for yoga. I go to an amazing nature writing session in York. So I found for me, it wasn't happening. I wasn't making it happen myself. So I book into something to make sure that I do those things. So, but find what works for you. There is no right or wrong. It's finding what works for you, fits into your life, and that you can feel is helping to de-stress you. And then sleep. So sleep is one of the things that we're really challenged with in menopause. As I say, there's hormonal things going on, but we're also just getting more stressed. And so we really struggle to sleep. And sleep is one of those tricky things that everybody kind of goes, but I haven't got any more hours in the day. What can I do? I can't sleep anymore. But we need to think about our sleep quality as well as our sleep quantity. If the hours that we can sleep is set, then can we make sure we're getting better sleep? So some of the things that we can do to improve our sleep, making sure we have a consistent wake time. So we get up at pretty much the same time within an hour or so every day. Making sure that we get light exposure as soon as we can in the morning. Obviously, at this time of year, you might be getting up way before it's actually light, but getting outdoor light exposure as soon as possible. You can also get the lamps, the SAD lamps, the seasonal affective disorder lamps, which can help. But getting that light exposure helps to set our circadian rhythm, which then makes it easier to get to sleep in the evening. Trying to make sure that the thing that we do first when we wake up in the morning isn't picking up our phone and getting that dopamine hit, because otherwise, and this is particularly if you wake up in the middle of the night, you struggle to stay asleep, our body's craving that dopamine hit of getting that phone again. And if it knows that's what it gets first thing in the morning, it wants to wake up to get that hit. So not having the phone by a bedside table, not making that the first thing that you do in the morning. And then building that movement in as much as possible in the morning. Maybe that's doing your training, or maybe that's a walk, whatever it is, but trying to get some movement or some mobility work in the morning. In terms of what we do throughout the day, so trying to cut out our caffeine from midday onwards. Everybody responds differently to caffeine, but there is pretty much no doubt that if you are drinking it in the afternoon, it will still be in your system for longer. So trying to cut out caffeine with enough time for it to have kind of left your system before you're trying to go to sleep. Doing some of the stuff we just talked about in terms of actively reducing your stress. So whether that's thought work, working on your mindset, are your thoughts serving you, doing things to reset your nervous system, like the breathing that we just talked about, and making sure your brain has time without input. So some downtime. We kind of go, oh, it's not fair, I can't sleep at night. But how often do we practice not thinking about things? We spend all day thinking, whizzing round, whirring, and then we expect to be able to just lie down in bed and go, oh, yep, brain's quiet now. So actually learning how to quiet and down our brain, practicing it almost. And then in the evening, reducing alcohol. We think alcohol helps us sleep. It doesn't. It's a sedative. So it knocks us out, but it's not meaning that we're getting that sleep while we're knocked out. Making sure we've got a cool room, particularly if we're having hot flushes and things. But anyway, we want our room to be cool. The cooler the room, not within reason, but a cool room is going to help you sleep better. Cutting out the blue light before bed, trying to have a curfew of maybe a few hours where you don't look at your phone or your laptops or whatever before bed. But it's not just about the blue light, it's not about turning on the magic blue light filter. It's making sure we're not having that brain stimulation just before bed. So trying to make sure we're not on our phone, we're not on our laptops, we're not thinking, doing work before bed. If you do really struggle with sleep, then cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia can be really powerful, as can the thought work that we were talking about at the beginning of the session. Trying to make sure that you're getting over 2 hours before bed after eating. I said that really strangely. Make sure there's a gap of at least 2 hours after eating before you go to sleep, so that your body has time to have digested the food before you try to go into this sleeping. Otherwise, you're getting in the way of the sleep part of your body because it's too busy still doing the digest part. So we talk about that parasympathetic overload where you're trying to sleep and digest at the same time. Trying to maintain that consistent sleep time, and then making sure we save the bed for sleep. So not sitting in the bed doing your work, not waking up in the middle of the night and tossing and turning and not being able to get back to sleep. So make it that your brain associates being in bed with sleeping rather than doing the whole, being awake. So hopefully some of those are helpful. Some of them we know and we don't do anything about. Try giving them a go and see if they work for you, and do them for long enough to actually give it a proper go. So in summary of the things that we've talked about today, we want to work on awareness of whether our mindset is serving us and how we can take action to change that. We can look at what we can do to reduce the causes of stress, what we can do to build a regular habit to de-stress ourselves once stress occurs, and what we can do to improve our sleep. Oh, wrong way. For those of you who have been tuning in all week, I've been doing a competition for a prize draw to win loads of different coaching prizes. And you get a different clue each day. It's been triathlon themed, so you've had the swim, bike, and run clues already. Today's clue is a smile. So hopefully wrapping up that exercise in a positive way, feeling happy at the end rather than feeling exhausted. So today's clue is smile. So there's details on the website where all the recordings are of what you need to do, but basically email me the code word from at least 3 of the 4 sessions and you'll go into that prize draw. So if you've got questions, and I can see I've got a few questions come in already, I will get back to those. But if you have got any other questions, then do pop them into the chat, or you can unmute in a second and ask them if that's easier. Let me just let you know, I think most of you have been on these calls before, so you know all this, but I'll just quickly whiz through. So if you're interested in finding out any more, as I say, you'll get an email after this session, hopefully soon after this session, but I have got a swim session booked at 2, so it depends how long YouTube takes to download. But you will get a link at some point today through to all of the sessions, all of the recordings from the week. So you've got access to all of that content in there. It will stay there for a month, so do get watching it within the next month before I take down that page. If you're interested in working with me on any of the things that I've talked about today, any things going forwards, I've got a special offer on at the moment of 50% off a light touch off-season plan. So the light touch plan, we speak each month, we talk about anything that's coming up, anything to do with menopause, but anything to do with your training, nutrition, anything that's impacting on you or your training. We talk about that on the coaching call. We then discuss your training. I write you a training plan, which is all delivered online. You go off and do your training, and then the next month we catch up again on a Zoom call and we discuss how things have gone, and we talk about anything we need to be able to build your training. So if you're interested in that, the 50% off is for up to 4 months between November and February next year. It's for a base plan only, so it wouldn't include any race specific training builds, but we can talk about racing absolutely in that time. There's 10 places, and if you're getting emails from me from Menopause, then you've got that priority access to those 10 places. So get booked in, you'll get details about it in the email that will come after this call. If you've got any questions, give me a shout or book in that call to find out more. And then finally, there's just some quotes from my clients. I mean, I would say in terms of working with my clients, I try and combine that focus on our mindset, so we're getting the best out of ourselves, making sure that we're happier and healthier. So it's not just about writing a training plan to get to a goal race or whatever, but it's about making sure that we get there happier, healthier in our body, and with skills that we can take way beyond just that training race or whatever, but take into the rest of our life. You can also follow me on social media, Facebook and Instagram at Feel Fit with Lucy. I try and put some training tips and help various different things on there. And if you're getting the Menopause Week emails, then you'll get my weekly emails as well, which have got various different sort of tips, support, inspiration, hopefully in there. Right, so let's go into the questions. So some feedback about the breathing. Good to hear that that has helped. Roots, so a question for the end: how to break a vicious loop of unhelpful thoughts around the training process. Do you want to either unmute and tell me a little bit more, or type into the chat what those unhelpful thoughts are? Not in any great detail, but just so I understand kind of what the cycle that you're stuck in is there. I'll give you a second just to type in. If you don't want to, that's absolutely fine. I can answer it anyway. Okay, no worries. Yeah, I'll leave you to type and I'll go back to some of the other questions while you're typing. Gemma, yes, I'll drop you an email, but Gail, oh my God, I've completely forgotten her surname. I think if you go back to that slide, what's the surname? She's absolutely amazing. She runs amazing sessions, and Gail Johnson, but I'll drop you an email with her details on, but I would highly, highly recommend her nature writing sessions. Root is still typing, and I think that was all the questions. Has anybody else got any questions on anything? Go for it. Yes.
It's probably quicker for me to talk than it is to type.
Yeah.
I suppose I was kind of wanted to know how you make the distinction between good stress and bad stress, because sometimes a low level of stress can be a good thing. It certainly motivates me to get my work done when I've got a pressing deadline. Um, but so kind of recognizing that, at what point do you tip between kind of an okay, a good, acceptable level of stress, and the point at which actually this is now becoming problematic and I need to do something about it.
And I guess there's lots of different ways of answering that. I'd say, first of all, how you feel. Are you
Mm,
comfortable with the level of stress? So
yeah.
if you are getting to the point where you can't sleep, and that bit of work you're trying to get done, you're not getting done because you can't sleep, and you're sitting there at your laptop or whatever trying to do the work, and you're just like, oh my God, I can't even think because I'm trying to get it done and I'm panicking. Not helpful, not serving you in that context. But I'd also take a step back before that. That's the really obvious side where it's not serving us. But before we get to that point, we can still be really stressed and maybe, oh yeah, I'm feeling really motivated and getting it done. But if we always work in that way, what's the impact on our health? And you can't know that until get a hormone panel done or something, and you realize that your stress hormones are sky high, and that's having a long-term impact on your health. So whilst we're so used to saying, yes, I need a deadline in order to get things done, do we? Or can we learn to organize ourselves better? We're so in this cycle of always working to a deadline and always needing that pressure to get things done. And, I do that as well. Absolutely. I finished this presentation 5 minutes before I was doing it now, but I have been working on, that was tidying up. But the more we can actually work with ourselves and say, is this serving me? Why? And it goes back to that procrastination, probably. Why am I procrastinating on getting this thing done and waiting till the deadline comes to get it done, and learning how to work with ourselves more effectively? So in answer to your question, when it's not helpful, it's definitely not helpful, we know that, but can we take a step back before that, so we're not having to live in this kind of adrenaline fueled, if I get the coffee in and if I have the deadline and I do an all-nighter or whatever, I can get it done, and then we have that complete dip
Mm,
afterwards because we've worked so hard, had all that adrenaline, and then we don't get anything done the next day because we've exhausted ourselves. So actually, if we'd managed just to do it gradually, maybe we'd have been more effective. And some
mm,
things are out of our control, of course they are. But I think in that context, I think you were saying it's a bit more something you could manage. It's taking that choice to manage it and realizing, working with ourselves. And I'm not going to talk about all ways of doing effective working, but we know that if we just sit there and work for hours and hours, it's not effective. If we can do an hour or so and take a break, and an hour or so, whatever, going out into the garden, coming back in, whatever it is, but so that we're stimulating our brain, we're so much more creative. Depends what work we're doing, but if there's any creativity in it, I'll try and write an email and I'm sitting there, till I'm blue in the face and not getting it done. Go outside, oh brilliant, I've got all my inspiration straight away. So being more aware of what works for us and what doesn't, and actually listening to our body and finding the things that work best for us. Does that answer that enough?
yeah, yeah, very much so. Thank you.
Brilliant. Let me go back to Ruth's question. So, example of unhelpful thoughts can range from, is there point in continuing with the training when I'm only going to end getting similar timings in the end, or during the event itself starting to feel deflated as a result of negative comments in previous events that resulted in a DNF? Okay, so in terms of, and I'm just going back to your original question to make sure, yeah, so breaking the vicious soup, it's a soup as well, but a vicious loop of unhelpful thoughts. Anything that's not serving us, being aware that that thought isn't serving us and choosing to have a different thought, that's kind of the basis of any of the work that I do with people on mindset. So if that thought's coming up, so for example, you were saying you kind of go into this negative loop of you're doing the event and you start getting that negative comments coming back, and this is something you want to do way before you're actually in the event itself, but realizing that you're going down that negative path. I talk about the way our thoughts go being like taking a walk through the woods, and you're walking down through the woods, and there's this big path that you walk down every day and everybody walks down, and it's a really big wide path, really obvious where you're going, it's so well worn. And then one day, and that's in your case, Ruth, that's the path of, oh, I'm going to start thinking about these negative comments that came up before. That's where your thoughts always go. Then one day you go, okay, I'm going to choose to take a different path. I'm going to choose to say, rather than going, oh, it might all go wrong and I might DNF again, think, I could do this. I've done my training. I know what I'm doing. I think this could go well. And that can feel so alien and feel like, well, yeah, but if I think that, maybe, and it feels you don't want to go down that path. And if you imagine you're in that woods and you see this tiny path and it's all overgrown and you don't want to go down there because you just think, well, I don't know where it's going to go to, but you go down it and it's hard work the first time because there's brambles and nettles and you know it's all muddy and overgrown, you're not sure where it's going, but you got there. You're not quite sure where you got. It was all you got a bit lost, but you got through the path. Then the next day, you're going down that big, well-worn path, and you think, okay, I could go down that path again. And this time it's a little bit easier because you've cleared some of the nettles and the brambles, and you've got a bit more of a sense of where it goes. And each time you go down there, it gets easier and easier. So if you have that metaphor in your mind, and you think back to what you're saying about you keep on going down this negative loop of going back the same, worrying about the DNF again. Each time you choose to say, I can do this, just because it happened before on a DNF, there's no reason to think it will happen again. I can do this, and choose to take that other path. It gets that little bit easier, but you have to keep on doing it over and over again to start to change that thought process. So I hope that helps with the kind of general pattern there. In terms of, and it would be the same process for the other example you've given of, is there a point in continuing with training when I'm only going to get similar timings in the end? But one thing just to add into that is we are crap as human beings at learning. We keep doing the same thing over and over again, and we don't learn from our, whether we call it our mistakes or our experiences. But if you do keep continuing with the same training, you're getting similar timings in the end, is there something you can change in what you're doing? Is there something that you could do differently that might give different results? So I'm not going to go into examples because it completely depends on what you're doing. But if we keep on doing, what's the definition of insanity is to keep on doing the same thing over and over. I've misquoted Einstein there, but whatever it is. So can we change something in what we're doing? And maybe that would change something in terms of our results. So two different ideas there. Change what you're doing if you want a different result, but also just that idea, if you're getting stuck in that loop, to realize each time your mind starts going down that loop, and it could be anything, the worrying about menopause, the whatever it is, each time your mind goes down there, to go, I have a choice. I can go down that path that I always go down, or I can dare to take that different path. It's going to feel really awkward, really uncomfortable the first time, but the more times I go down there, the easier that's going to get. Shout back, Ruth, if that helped to answer or not. Anybody else got any questions on that or on anything to do with that? I'm going to answer Sarah's question here because I think it's a specific example. This is one that she'd sent in from previously, but I think it's probably something that we can all identify with. So Sarah had said, what has the biggest impact on those difficult days when doing a balance of everything isn't realistic? And I've cut and pasted two questions from her together, so that's my fault that question doesn't make sense. But she kind of gave me some examples, and she said, I should be doing this, I should be doing this, I should be doing this, I should be doing this. Which one should I do? And to answer this in more general, Sarah, I will answer that question specifically as well, but to answer it more generally in terms that might help us, we all know there's things we should do, and there's so much pressure on us, and I've given you a million of the things through this week, and I've tried very hard not to say should, but essentially your mind can come away with that should, and as Gemma said earlier, you feel guilty when you're not doing these things. Rather than getting stuck into the shoulds, try instead and take a step back. And again, we were just talking about it a minute ago, but learn to listen to ourselves. If we can't do everything, we're going to feel overwhelmed and we end up doing nothing. So instead, let's work on trying to work with ourselves to do some things well. And in terms of which things should we do, find out which makes you feel better. Sarah was asking particularly in terms of mood and energy. You know for yourself which things make you feel better. So don't listen to me and what I've said theoretically should work. Try experimenting. And again, that learning, we're so useless at learning from our own experience, and we're so cut off from actually thinking, how do we feel? When I work with clients on weight loss and I say, oh, you've been cutting out sugar for the last few weeks, how do you feel? And they go, oh yeah, actually, I feel loads better. I've got so much more energy, but we haven't even realized that. So learning to listen to ourselves and learn from our own experience. So that would be number one. Well, number one, don't try and do too much. Do small things well and build on them rather than try and take on too many things in one go. Secondly, listen to yourself and see what makes the difference for you and what you feel better doing and what fits into your life. Because I can say do this, but that's just not practical for you. So what works best for you? Then just to kind of to answer the question, so I think Sarah was saying, what's best in terms of mood and energy? I would say if you only had 5-10 minutes, go for a walk outdoors in daylight. So we're getting the movement, we're getting the nature, we're getting the daylight into our eyes. And while we're doing it, try and be mindful, rather than getting stuck in the worrying about everything we need to do when we get back. Take those 10 minutes yourself, live in that moment, look at the colors in the leaves, look at the light between the trees, whatever it is, but be mindful and enjoy that experience and allow yourself. And again, as women, we are useless at allowing ourselves to have time for ourselves. And, we feel guilty if we're not doing stuff for other people all the time. So allow yourself that 10 minutes to be self-indulgent, if that's the word you want to choose. I regret choosing those words, and I don't think it is self-indulgent, but spend those 10 minutes on yourself. That would be my recommendation. And then from there, you can start building in other things. Okay, I've got some more questions coming in. Brilliant. And I think that's answered all those questions. And I'll just go into a quick bit more detail on terms of building habits. And sorry for any of you who've seen these slides before, but when we're trying to build habits, we so often think it's about willpower and building willpower. And I always, think, which is easier, like this guy pulling a car up the hill or dragging a sledge over the snow? We want to try and find the glide rather than the brute strength to get things done. So if we're using up willpower, we can do it for a week, a month, whatever. And if you're David Goggins, you do it all the time, but most of us aren't David Goggins. We need to find a way to make these things easier for ourselves. So when we're trying to build a new habit, all the things I've talked about this week, and if you're like, oh my God, I've got this list of 1,000,000 things, don't try and do 1,000,000 things. You have got, the rest of your life to do those 1,000,000 things in. Choose one, maximum 2 things that you're going to take away from this week to work on. Make them small enough that you can do them and that you can visualize yourself doing them. So rather than saying, yeah, I think I can do strength training every day for an hour before work or whatever, visualize what that looks like in your own life. Can you actually imagine doing it? It's got to be something you can imagine doing. And if it isn't, choose something else or make it smaller until you can. And then your mind will go, well, it's not worth doing if it's that small. And I will say back to you, but you weren't doing it at all before. So something is better than nothing. So make it small enough you can do it. Try and add a trigger. So you're not just going to do it at some point during the day, but I do it after I have my morning cup of coffee, or I do it when I first finish work, or whatever it is. So you've got something you relate it to. So you tie it to something that's already happening. And then commit with intention. So rather than saying, yes, I plan to do strength training 3 times a week sometime in the distant future, I plan I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do it on Sunday, Wednesday and Friday. And on Sunday, I'm going to do it at 3 o'clock, and, actually think through, visualize it and commit to doing it rather than just, I hope I'll do it. And then again, as I've said a few times already, but that idea of reflecting and learning. If you get to the end of the week and you only did it twice, brilliant, you did it twice and you hadn't done it at all last week. So that's actually brilliant. That's not something to criticize yourself for, but learn. Was it that 3 times was too many? Was it that it's better on a Thursday rather than a Friday? Whatever it is. So learn so you can come back to it and so you can try and improve on it or build on it the following week. I'm going to shut up talking. Do shout, as I say, you can unmute or type into chat if you've got any questions on that. If not, then it has been lovely getting to know you or reacquainting with some of you this week. As I say, you'll get the link through to the recording with all of the different sessions. If you're interested in working with me, then look at the email for the link to book in that call, to book in a call. If you're not sure, there's absolutely no commitment, just book in the call and we can have a chat, see if there's something that I can help you with. Brilliant. Lovely to have met you. Thank you, Alice. And I look forward to speaking to you soon whenever I next come across you all. Lovely to meet you. Take care. Bye.